Hi there, it's Lindsay, and today we are going to paint these pears. We're sketching them in our sketchbook for Sketchbook Sunday, and if you're a member of Critique Club, you can find the real-time version of this tutorial. It's about an hour and a half long in Critique Club. So check that out if you're a member. If you'd like to be a member, then you can follow the link in the video description. It's $5 a month, and it gives you two long, kind of more advanced tutorials, plus access to all the previous tutorials, and it allows you to upload 2 paintings a month of your own original work for personalized feedback from me. If you're looking to grow as an artist or you just want those longer tutorials, I'd love to have you in Critique Club. All the information is linked down below. So I started off by sketching these pears with some watercolor pencils, and these pears came right off my sister's tree in her garden, and they've been sitting on my windowsill and I've wanted to eat them so bad, so like I'm gonna finally sketch them and then I can eat them, which I haven't done yet, so I'm looking forward to that. That'll be a good breakfast. I'm using a combination of Albright Drewer, Caran d'Ache Super Colors, and also some Crafter's Companion Spectra Aqua blend. I think that's what they're called. They're part of the Spectrum Noir family, and they all worked really well together. Basically what I want to do here is get my sketching down and also get a base layer of color down. Now for liquefying these, I will just use some water and a synthetic brush, and I'm using a 1/2 inch flat here because I just want to get kind of like an even wash over everything. If you don't have watercolor pencils, you can certainly do this with your regular old watercolor paints. Don't feel like you have to run out and buy something special if you don't have watercolor pencils. Although I will say watercolor pencils are a really handy supply to have on hand, and the thing that's really nice about them is that you can use them under watercolor for a drawing if you want that no-line watercolor look. Some people just hate to see graphite lines or colored pencil lines, and that's totally fine. And it's also handy for sketching on your canvas if you do acrylics, because they'll dissolve and you won't have any bleed through of pencil lines or pen lines or anything. So it's a handy supply to have. Now what I'm doing here is sketching on the shadows, and because I'm working and I have the actual pears in front of me, they're actually sitting on a box to raise them up a little bit with a piece of white paper on top. And I have my pears sitting there. Since they're on my workspace, I have a lot of different lights pointing at my work area because to film I need a lot of light so it looks good. And because of that, I end up getting a few different shadows. I'll get the main shadow, but then I also get some that are kind of lighter and more diffused around the pears. And I think that's a really interesting aspect of this composition, so I really wanted to make sure I rendered that. I'm using a Payne's Gray watercolor pencil, and to get those lighter shadows that I was talking about, I'm simply taking some of the pigment off the tip of the pencil and just diluting it on my ceramic palette there, and that way I can make lighter washes of the color and I don't have to worry about getting any lines or streaks from going in with the pencil. You'll notice that when I color with my watercolor pencils, I go very lightly. Oftentimes I'll go in circles, or I will use the edge of the lead to shade. That's so that it will dissolve really easily when I go to add water, because I don't want to have a texture on this layer. I want this layer to be fairly smooth. We will be going over it with traditional colored pencils, but I'm getting a lot of the work done with these watercolor pencils. If I did it all with traditional pencils, it would take a lot more layering, blending, and time. And also it could, bother your wrists if you are someone that has arthritis or any other carpal tunnel or wrist issues, strength issues in your wrist. So that's another plus for the watercolor pencils. It just really takes a lot of the work away. Of course, if you don't have watercolor pencils and you want this look and you have regular colored pencils, if you have odorless mineral spirits, Gamsol, Goo-Gone, anything like that that's like a solvent, you could do a very light shading with regular colored pencils and dissolve it with your solvent. So that's another option. It's a stinkier option, and I just prefer to use the watercolor pencils because I have them, and then I don't have to deal with the smells of the solvent. But hey, use what you have. Improvise, make do, find new ways to use the supplies that you have on hand, and it'll give you more creativity in your art. I'm a big believer in that. If you can find a new way to use an old supply, all the better. And I do find that if I'm doing a lot of coloring with my pencils, I need to sharpen them more often. This sharpener here is kind of nifty because it's got 2 holes. One hole gives you a really long lead and the other one points the lead. So if you're doing a technique like I did with the Payne's Gray and I was using it as a watercolor, I could just sharpen off the wood and leave the lead intact, and I could get my pigment that way. But if I need to like crispen up these edges like I am here, then I point the pencil so I can get right in there and really make a nice sharp edge. So a pencil sharpener like that, it's by Koom, K-U-M. You can find it on Amazon or any art supply store. Should have it in stock. It's a pretty popular brand, and there's refill blades in the sharpener usually, and you can also buy replacement blades if it goes dull. So it has a lid on it. I lost the lid like years ago. I think it fell in the trash, so mine doesn't have a lid on it anymore. Not that it held that many shavings, so I just sharpen it over a little cup, and it works just fine. So yeah, probably more information you ever wanted on pencil sharpeners, but there you go. I also find that I can sharpen my pencils my watercolor pencils even in a electric sharpener, and it works great. I get very little breakage that way. So I'm still layering up some more colors, adding in some warm yellows, like yellow ochres, and some more greens, and just liquefying them. I'm keeping the palette fairly limited because I don't want to get mud. Now, these pears are not like really bright anyway, but it's so much easier to dull down a color than it is to brighten it back up. So I'm just kind of going layer by layer and building up the luminosity in this piece. When you've got something really simple like a pair of pears, you can really search for that detail and go deep on the detail, which I think is really fun. And that's something that you can do when you have the physical specimen with you. So if you go apple picking where it's fall here, you in the United States anyway, you could, save out a couple interesting apples. Maybe pick an apple. If you have one that's got like the stem and a leaf attached, that would be a really great subject to draw. You could look around for any like weeds or flowers you see growing if you're on your daily walk, or berries or anything like that, because if you can hold it and you can observe it and really investigate it, you can get so much more detail in your picture because you have it right there with you. You can also use a magnifying glass to see your detail if you're having some trouble. As we get older, it can be difficult to see details sometimes, and that really is helpful, and there's nothing wrong with using those tools to get the best results. Now I have switched over to my traditional colored pencils, and that thing that's on my white colored pencil there, that's a pencil extender. I cannot recommend those enough. You can find them very affordably online. This one happens to be by Clover, but I've also used the ones by Art and Fly. They all work really well, and they're very affordable, and it makes it so you can use those that last inch of pencil, so you don't have to throw it away. And also, if you store your pencils in like cups or upright in some sort of holder, it keeps those nubs from getting like buried and then lost, and then you never use them up because you can't find them in with all the other taller pencils. So that's probably the best reason to use them, is just to keep their height up so you can see them in your case. Now, the thing I love about the traditional pencils is I can layer this on top of the watercolor pencil or watercolor, and it's not going to bother that. It's not going to move it. It's not going to smudge it. It's not going to alter it. It's just going to layer over it because those two medias don't see each other. So even if I was to go in and say I'm putting down regular colored pencil and I said, oh gee, I wish that was smoother, I don't really want to burnish over there, or use a colorless blender pencil, what I could do is I could use some solvent. I could even use a clear blending marker, like an alcohol-based blending marker. It doesn't work as well as solvent, but if you have an extra one, because they can clog up with a wax pencil, you could give that a whirl. And I just like how I can add the shading at the edge and give it a little bit more heft and roundness, and just make it feel a little bit more realistic. This dark brown pencil is really good for getting the edges. Tuscan red is really good. I use that quite a bit on the edges to really make a nice deep warm shadow. I like to layer indigo over the Tuscan red to give me those really dark darks, and then I can save black for if I need it at the end, which is what I typically do. I usually don't add too much in way of black or white till the end. Sometimes I'll add white if I know I need to keep like a highlight or a spot or something, so I kind of put that down there as a resist, because it's really hard to stick color on top of white. But I generally save the black until the end if I need it, because sometimes you just need that extra pop of a dark value, but oftentimes you really don't. And if you do add it one place, you want to go and add it a few places so it doesn't seem to be out of place. So you can see I'm adding in some white where I know I need to keep some highlights. That's just going to protect that area. And it's not going to be super, super white because I do have a little bit of a layer of wax colored pencil there already. This was so much fun to paint. I was kind of hemming and hawing. I've had these sitting on my windowsill and I keep looking at them thinking, oh, that'd be fun to draw. But I'm like, well, is it good enough to draw? Is it worth doing a drawing of? If I use this for Sketchbook Sunday, which is what, I personally feel like working on And what I'm excited about, are other people going to enjoy it too, or are they going to be like, oh, pears, how lame is that? How boring is that? But I really want to urge you to draw the things that you're interested in. So I decided I was going to do this anyway. I figured, well, you know, if I feel like it's too boring when I'm done, I don't have to use the footage. But I'm so glad I drew this. I had so much fun really searching out the detail and taking risks. And you'll see the risk at the end, because I actually I had to consult with my husband and my kids. I'm like, should I add this to it? And it was funny because I got mixed reviews, and I figured, well, hey, nobody has to know if I add this to it and it ruins it. I'll just take photos before I do that, and that way I don't have to worry about it. And you'll see that in a little bit. So I'm adding some warmer reds now. So far I've kept my reds very cool, and the reason for that is because cool colors do not make mud as easily as warm colors do. So when I did my first washes with the watercolor pencils, I used the kind of berry toned cool reds. When I did my first work with the colored pencils, I used cool toned crimsons. So now I'm actually using some, like a poppy red and like a Chinese orange to get that warmth and brownness to the pears. But you want to wait to the end to do that, because your warmer colors tend to be more opaque. They could cover up what you have down below, but they also mix more mud. So you just want to use them where you need them for that warmth, for that punch of color, and then kind of back off. Crimson is really nice because you get that bright color, and it does have a little bit of a cool tone. So you can see that crimson pencil that's right next to that poppy colored pencil. The poppy is in a pencil extender. Ooh, lots of P words there. That crimson is going to be real crisp because it's very transparent and very cool. Your cooler colors tend to be more transparent. Your warmer colors tend to be more opaque also. And I think that's why they go muddy, is because they tend to be a little more opaque. Now here I'm using some indigo to really deepen up some of my shadows. You can see on the edges. Again, like going over that Tuscan red where I added in the edges can really help. Adding cream is a really great color for highlights because it's not as cold and stark as white. So if you're doing those final highlights and you really want to warm something up and brighten it without making it feel cold, cream is a great way to do that. You can even go over the white highlights that you put with the cream, and that's going to help it. So at this point, I decided there was little spots on the pears, and I'll just bring that photo back in so you can see. And I wanted the spots to look really random. I didn't want them to look like I drew them on with like a white paint pen. So what I'm doing here is I just laid a piece of white notebook paper down on my drawing. I traced around the contour because I could kind of see through the thin paper, and then I cut out the pear shapes. And I could set that right down on top of my sketchbook, clip it right down with my sketchbook clips. And then I've got the cutouts if I need to protect one of the papers. Now I'm using this spattering tool that my friend Rich had given me a couple of years ago because it gives me such a fine spatter. And I'm using gouache. I'm using some white mixed with some yellow ochre. And I have water added to it till I have about a 2% milk consistency. And then I'm brushing it on the spattering tool, and then I just tested it on cardstock to make sure I was going to get the spatter pattern and the size dots, the amount of dots that I wanted. I'm covering up one of the pears, and I'm just carefully rotating the spattering tool so I get the little bit of dots, and then I'm doing it to the other one. So that's just giving me a really, really light dotty look. And then I can go in and I can take a pen, like this little just sketching pen here. It's just like a dip pen, and I'm using that same brush to load that up with that same cream colored ink, and I'm dotting in some more distinct dots. And that way I get that random look of the pears without losing, without making it look too fussy, and without losing all of the shading and depth building that I've done already. Now, if you overspray, like I got a little bit of dots in the shadows, you can blot them off. If they still don't come off, what you can do is take a Q-tip and dampen it with some clear water, and then you can go and just kind of wipe it off, because it will come off of the waxy colored pencil really easily. And you're not putting too much water on the Q-tip, so if you do need to wipe it off an area that's just watercolor pencil, like the shadow, it should be fine. And then I'm just adding in some final highlights with the pen, and then kind of softening it with a small round brush. You can see I put some white on its own there. Look how cold that looks. It doesn't look right, see? So I'm going to add some of the warmer with the yellow ochre white in there so that it gives it more of a natural look. So you want to really pay attention to the temperature of your highlights, as well as the color temperature of everything else that you're drawing, because a highlight that's the wrong color temperature can really throw everything off. You want to make sure things agree and look good together. And that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this. And if you want to see the real-time version of this, check out Critique Club. Link is in the video description. It's $5 a month, and it gives you access to lots of more intermediate to advanced tutorials, as well as the chance to submit your work for an in-depth critique from me. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend, and until next time, happy creating!